Do you feel confused, overwhelmed, and sometimes frustrated by the conflicting health advice out there? I know that I have experienced these emotions and these feelings when trying to navigate the field of health because I want to live my best life, right? Like, don't we all? I want to be healthy and live for a long time at a high quality level. And so sometimes with all the conflicting health advice out there, it can be a minefield to navigate. However, these feelings of stress and worry, it's actually going to be to our detriment rather than allowing us to thrive, become the healthiest version of ourselves. However, in this episode, I'm joined by Dr. Matt Corbin as we discuss this topic of health and try to simplify it by looking at health through four main prisms. And Matt shares a actionable step that you can take in each prism. As well as that, we discuss what is biomechanics and biomedicine, and we also discuss Matt's work as a osteopath. And we discuss these topics because this is the work that Matt does and actually can help us to live a more healthier life. Like, what are these science-led practices and how can they help us live a healthier life? So basically, this episode simplifies health to help you live a more healthier life. So without further ado, let's hop on over into my conversation into this episode with Dr. Matt Corbin. Dr. Matt Corbin, thank you for joining me here on Raising Consciousness today. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, mate. I'm doing very well. How about yourself?
I'm very well, thank you. And looking forward to our conversation, diving into your journey, your story, but also your approach to health as well. I'm looking forward to be diving into the four pillars, I believe, that you approach health kind of from that perspective in four pillars. Before we dive into all of that, I would love to get a summary of your work, who you are, what you do, and then we will go from there and dive into everything health. But who is Matt Corbin and what do you do and why do you do what you do?
Wow. Big question. That's probably going to be the hardest question that you asked me today, I reckon. I'll give you the generic response, I suppose, and then you can pry and prod other little bits of information out of me, I'm sure. But obviously, I'm a health professional. I work in Melbourne, Australia. I've never lived anywhere else, which we touched on in the pre-show. And I started working in the health industry probably about 15, almost 16 years ago. So like a lot of people, I suppose, I started in the fitness industry, a personal trainer. There are a few little bits and pieces that sort of led me down that pathway prior to that. But once I started working in gyms, I just had this sort of insatiable need to continue learning and adding more and more and more. So after a few years in the fitness industry, I ended up going and studying biomedicine at uni. I was originally going to go and do the exercise sports science, and I thought, that's too much overlap. That's not challenging enough. I didn't do any science or anything like that at school. I was a horrible student. I dropped out of PE in year 12, which is ironic now. And then I sort of added that. And then the next step was I took another year break. And then I thought, you know what, I want to add more. And then I ended up going and doing a 5-year, which I didn't really want to commit to another 5-year degree, but I did a 5-year sort of bachelor and master's of osteopathy. And throughout all of this study, I worked in lots of different roles. I worked in community health. I would work in the gym still. And that sort of let me explore lots of different elements in the health field. So over the time, I sort of got to see what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, what I considered was working and most beneficial for people, and maybe some of the things I picked up that maybe wasn't as beneficial. And over time, I just keep adding these little things. And at the moment, about 6 years ago, I started my own business, and at the moment, I've finally moved into my own clinic space during the years we won't talk about, the pandemic years. I escaped a gym that I was working in. And now I essentially run a program that lets me collaborate with other solopreneurs, so some other health professionals. And we basically onboard clients for 6 months roughly at the moment. That seems like the average. And what we do is we try and use all of our expertise, we combine it together, and we just try and give this person the most possible value over the 6 months. So the idea is that, when you come to us, we give you all of the tools that we can so that you can actually take back control and manage your own health. Because at the end of the day, I don't really think, there's two things that you can't outsource. You can't outsource your health or your happiness. So they are 100% yours. And I just, I've gone through my own health ups and downs, and all of these things I've picked up, I just want to pass on to others. So that's sort of how I spend my day to day at the moment.
Awesome, man. So it seems that there's a lot of different elements to your work, and I want to dive into those. So you mentioned, I believe you mentioned biomedicine, and I know that biomechanics is also part of what you do as well. So what is biomedicine? What is biomechanics? And I guess for like the average person, like why do they matter? Like what's the association between biomedicine, biochemics, and our health?
Yeah, good question. I probably didn't know what it was either initially, but probably my description is biomedicine is sort of where healthcare meets science, right? So biomedical scientists, you don't typically hear about them too much, but they're sort of responsible for, understanding, diagnosing, treating, and preventing human disease at a population level. So it's not just studying the human body and how it works, but it's actively trying to find new ways to treat or manage diseases. So biomedical scientists, they typically work in a lab. You don't really hear too much about them, but their goal is essentially to better understand how to keep people healthy and treat disease. And interestingly enough, I sort of went back and looked at some of the subjects that I went through in this course, because believe it or not, I actually did this course about a decade ago now, or more. Let's not tell everyone, but they're topics of anatomy, physiology. I wrote them down: pharmacology, genetics, immunology, microbiology, biochemistry, pathology, health promotion, nutritional science. So look, I think when I work in an industry that's essentially trying to help people live better longer. So without even realizing it at the time, I think that was really valuable information to have an understanding of how disease develops and progresses. And in terms of biomechanics, look, essentially that's just looking at how people move, right? It's the link between understanding the biology and the structure of somebody and then how they function. And applying, my biomechanics professor would hate me because I'm horrible at all of the terminology of physics, but I understand how it works, and that I've just sort of always been that way. But I think the two biggest things that people struggle with at the moment are musculoskeletal pain and the development of chronic disease. So I think if we put biomechanics and biomedicine together, we sort of see the things that address the two biggest things that impact our long-term health. So I love that I sort of went down those pathways and explored that a little bit. I think it helps me in my day-to-day.
And you also mentioned your work or training as osteopath as well. So would love to, where does that come in, into your work, and actually for those people who don't know what that is as well, if we kind of explore that.
Yeah, sure. That's a really big question, and a lot of people don't know what an osteopath or osteopathy is, which is completely fair enough. And this is how I used to describe it to people. My explanations changed a tiny little bit because I don't think I was giving other professions quite enough credit at the time. But theoretically, let's say that you had knee pain and you would go and see a physio or a physical therapist, for an example, with knee pain. Typically, the different thought processes are: a physio will look at your knee they will treat the knee, they'll give you some exercises to strengthen the knee. But if you present to an osteopath with knee pain, it's drilled into us for the entirety of the 5 years, but we're sort of big picture thinkers, or we're holistic, so to speak. So we would say, you've got knee pain. Well, we want to figure out why there is knee pain, because that's where the symptoms are showing, but it might not be the cause. So we would look at your feet and, your hips and your ankles, typically things above and below. And osteopathy's, it's built around these 4 tenets or 4 pillars of osteopathy. And I mean, they are, the body is a unit, so mind, body, spirit. The body is capable of self-maintenance, self-healing, and self-regulation. Then we've got structure and function. They're interrelated. And then treatment is based off a rational understanding of all of the top 3. So we're very holistic. We're very focused on self-care. And I think that really fits into my belief and my values and my ethos around healthcare. So that's sort of a very brief difference of where osteopathy sticks out from other professions. But if you go to any good health professional, they're going to take a bit of a wider view now, especially now. I think it's becoming a little bit more mainstream, which is great.
Interesting. Okay. And the one thing you mentioned there that I actually wrote down was like the root cause. And I think that in the Western cultures and Western societies, we're very focused on like just treating symptoms. And so I wanted to kind of bring that up because obviously through all the work that you do, you actually focus on getting to the root cause. I've recently discovered like functional medicine and kind of other different practices that actually focus on getting to the root cause of things. From your perspective, like, why do you think that a lot of people and a lot of just like the society, I guess, focuses on more symptoms than getting to the root cause? Is that like a mindset change that you believe like we need to go through? And we'd just like to spend some time on actually talking about symptoms and like the root cause, because I think that it's something that I kind of see a lot. Like for example, someone may have a headache, for example, right? And so that's obviously a symptom, and so they would go and take some pills to clear that. But I come from the perspective of that actually there's a reason why you have the headache, right? And so what's the root cause of that, of the headache? And I think that it's all too easy nowadays to, you have a symptom and you get a pill to solve that ache or solve that pain. I'm not saying not to do that, but I think sometimes then we become just in that habit, right? And we don't actually never get to the root cause. And I think that's a lot of where chronic illnesses and maybe diseases can kind of flare up as well. So we'd love to get your thoughts, opinions, kind of perspective on that.
I think it's a good point, right? And it's a massive issue. Like we are almost the unhealthiest we've ever been. And I think it sort of goes along with that a little bit, because the reality is that just masking symptoms or just addressing the surface layer of things it's typically easier. So people are looking for the quick fix. We're in a very sort of instant gratification society. Everything we're just getting non-stop stimuli from left, right, and center. And I think we're looking for the fastest way to achieve everything. But in terms of the healthcare system, I think it's often just too much work for people, or potentially they're maybe being sold something different. So if we were to look at maybe a darker element of the healthcare is a business. And especially, my industry, osteopathy, is typically very manual therapy based. It's very hands-on treatment level focused. Now, I do about 2 or 5% of manual therapy. I believe in manual therapy. I believe it helps some people. But I personally would rather focus on going to the next level and figuring out, well, why do we need to keep getting this weekly treatment or this fortnightly treatment? And often, unfortunately, most of the people I work with have sort of been told that that's what they need. Um, Now, I don't know whether that's with malicious intent. I don't know if some people think that they are doing these people, people who work in healthcare typically want to help people. And if someone, especially with maybe chronic pain or uh, even acute pain, shows up, you want to help that person and you want to treat them and give them relief. But I think there's a bit of a disconnect between whether that's going to solve the problem, uh, or whether it's just a bit of a band-aid. And I honestly think that people probably just aren't ready to do the work, um, which sounds really harsh now that I'm saying that. It's a case by case basis, obviously. Hmm. That's very that's very thought provoking. I would probably go if you, let's say if we hypothetically had a made up client, right? Everyone's different. You mentioned the mindset element, and I think that's completely true. I think people have probably learned this learned this sense of helplessness, and they've got this illusion of what they can and can't achieve. And whether healthcare itself or the medical industry has sort of made people believe that or not, I'm not sure. That's definitely something we may need to consider about our communication when we work in this industry. But it's a great question.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's definitely something as you said, to consider. But I like so what I'm kind of gathering is through your work and your practice, and I've kind of actually thought about this quite a lot and believe this myself. I feel like it's about, as healthcare professionals, etc., to obviously, as you're saying, like to help people, but then to um, I guess help them in a way where they obviously like heal and then don't have to like keep coming back to you, I guess. Now, obviously, for people like yourself, like you're running your own business, so that might seem not counterintuitive, but obviously, like people who are in that space who want the business, maybe subconsciously, as you're saying, like they're continuing to do the physical treatments. But I think that actually, if you're providing a service and you're actually helping people and helping people to heal so that they don't have to keep coming back to you, or giving them the tools, right? So then they actually don't need you, then actually in the long run, they're going to actually refer people in their communities and stuff back to you. And I think a lot of people wouldn't necessarily don't have that mindset, not just in your line of work or in like the health space, etc., but actually just in life. So an example from my time, or from actually my kind of background. So I've done work in community development, and so I kind of got taught that actually working in like the communities, etc., is about giving the local residents basically the tools and the confidence and empowering them to kind of like do myself out of a job. And I guess in a way, it's a little bit counterintuitive, but I've kind of had that ingrained in me. I guess kind of through that, but maybe I also believe that as well. That kind of mindset like resonated with me, because that's actually how you end up changing people's lives. Like a lot of times, I've seen people who, they go to so there's somebody I know, and a family member who go to a acupuncturist, I believe. Now they do a great job. Like they leave that acupuncturist and they feel so much better, etc., etc. And I kind of asked them, like, did the acupuncturist give you tools and stuff to do at home, right? And they haven't. Now, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but for me, for in my kind of paradigm, like if for me in my thinking, I'm like, actually, would it be even better, even more empowering for the individual if they also had different tools and methodologies that they could also do at home, so they're not reliant also on healthcare professionals, if that makes sense. So we'd love to kind of explore that a bit deeper, because you are obviously in that space. Like, I'm kind of talking from someone kind of outside of the space, I guess. And it's obviously, it might be harder to do, I guess. But yeah, anyway, like, what's your thoughts on that? Do you agree, disagree? Is it finding a balance? Let's kind of explore that.
Yeah, I think it is. It's definitely, there's definitely the element of, feeling like you're putting yourself out of a job. Um, I would probably argue that maybe anybody who works in healthcare who still feels that way maybe is thinking about it a little bit wrong, because the reality is that when it comes to health, you're never really done. Like, there's always some elements that you can continue helping this person with. And if you've developed a really good rapport and trust and you've helped that person, um, the reality is that if you put something in place that helps them next, and you keep helping this person go to the next level, not only can you, in terms of, if we're just talking business revenue, you continue to have this person as a client, but now you've got whole new different service offerings as well. And along with the word of mouth, you've helped this person be successful. You got them to where they wanted to get, and now you've taken them to a place that they didn't even think they could get to. You continue to build and work with this person. Um, Look, I have a very similar mindset mindset to you, and I shared this post on LinkedIn today, I think, about my own individual thought process behind healthcare and my priorities. And maybe I'll run you through it, I suppose, because I think this is my thought process, and not everyone thinks like this, and I appreciate that, but I feel like it summarizes it pretty well. Hopefully I don't butcher it. So if we imagine, and let's just pretend for a moment that every single day you need to consume one fish to live the life that you want. And I know this is off-putting any sort of vegan or vegetarian listeners that you have, and I have vegan friends, but that's okay. It ruins the analogy, so I'm going to stick to it. But it's really important to note that this fish doesn't just jump up on your plate. You have to go and get it every single day. You have to go fishing. So my thought process, if I knew that information, I need to consume one fish every single day, my priority is that I want to be the one that does it. I want to go and get it. I want to catch it. I will watch other people. I will trial and error. I will fail on repeat, but I will try everything I possibly can for me to be the person that is catching the fish. That's my goal. Now, if I've exhausted all of those options, and for whatever reason I can't do it, my second priority, again, this is my personal opinion, my approach, my second priority would be to pay someone to teach me how to fish, because ultimately my goal is still to be the person that can fish on my own. That's what I want to do. Now, I'm pretty aware that you need to trust this person, whether it's just to get pointers or tips or advice or anything like that. Now, my third priority, after doing it myself, if I can't, I will pay someone to teach me. My third priority is to just pay somebody to hand me my fish for the day, right? And there are only ever two reasons that you'll ever catch me doing this. And one is because I'm starving, I'm desperate, and I just need that fish for the day. Or two, maybe I know how to fish. Maybe I can do it on my own, but every now and then it's nice to have dinner made for you. It's nice to order takeout just as a little treat, right? So I'm either desperate or it's a treat. But when I go into this situation, I know that this option, this third priority of mine, this doesn't help me tomorrow at all. It's a short-term solution, and I haven't taken anything away from it that actually helps me in the future. And that sort of summarizes, just in case the analogy isn't clear, that fish is your health and your happiness, and that is yours to catch every single day. And I think, you can't outsource these things. And I think one of the things that I've been disappointed in the healthcare system during my own sort of points of injuries and surgeries and all this sort of stuff, is that I would show up to a healthcare setting, and I would be ready to learn. I would want to be learning how to fish on my own, and these people would just sort of hand me the fish or the treatment or however we want to describe it, and then they would send me away. And the worst case that I experienced was that I ended up paying, it was just under $500, and I went to see this orthopedic surgeon, and it was the equivalent, to go back to the fish analogy, it was the equivalent of just being told that, you'll be right. They'll bite eventually. Just go home and keep doing what you're doing. You'll be fine. Just hang in there. And I was so let down with that approach, because it's not conducive to my values and how I approach my own health. That's I've taken lots of elements from the fitness industry and I've brought it into healthcare, because one of the biggest limitations in healthcare is time. I don't really hold it against these people, because what they do is they get through the treatment and then you run out of time. And when you make people feel better, maybe they don't see the need to follow through with the education or the rehab or learning all of these different skills, because that eats up more of their time. So I'm aware that time is a huge limitation with people, but in my business, time is not a limitation. And, I have 90-minute consultations. I take as much time as we possibly need. People are aware of this. They know from the get-go that they're not coming in for a treatment. I have a 30-minute free consult with every single person before I start to work with them, because I need them to understand that if a treatment is what they're after, I know plenty of amazing manual therapists, and I will refer them to that. But if they come in and see me, we are going to take the time, we're going to put in the work, and we're going to try and get to the bottom of this, so that hopefully they can take all of this knowledge and these tools, and they can use them for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years of their life and not have to rely on somebody else. Because I don't want to rely on somebody else, because I don't think you can for something like your health. I don't even know if that answered your question. I went off on a bit of a tangent there. But
No, it's all
that's
good. It's all good.
that's
It's all
how I
good.
approach it.
I no, that I love that, because it comes back to the thing you mentioned beforehand that I wrote down. Like, you can't outsource your health and happiness, right? Um, and yeah, there's like definitely themes kind of around that, and also you also kind of the root cause kind of theme also came out of that as well. Um, and yeah, and I totally agree with that. You can't outsource your health and your happiness, and yeah, I think that actually it's about because I'm kind of the same. I guess that was my point in terms of like beforehand. Um, I don't want to rely on someone to feel good, right? Like, I can go to, let's say, if I had knee pain, Matt, like I would come to someone like obviously yourself. We would hopefully like get to the root cause, to find the solutions, find the probably like lifestyle practices and habits and stuff for me to implement, for me to long term to feel better, etc. But I don't want necessarily to for that particular issue, right? Like, always having to come back to someone for the knee pain not to be that, right? Like, I want to thrive ultimately without always having to rely on somebody else. And I think that's definitely what I take out of the quote you mentioned beforehand, in terms of you can't outsource your health and or your happiness. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. Um, is that is that something that you're finding with your clients as well? Are they coming for you? Like, what stage are your clients kind of at? What are you kind of finding? Are they coming to you with this type of mindset? To like find long-term solutions, lifestyle kind of practices, or are they coming to resolve like the like just that pain? I'm curious on like where people's mindset is at. I'm sure it varies to client, etc. But I'm always fascinated in terms of like actually where are people at, roughly kind of in their kind of health journey, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. No, it makes sense. And I suppose I've, over the years, because I used to work in one of those clinics that was sort of I can't remember the name from it. I feel like the word even stems from your neck of the woods as well. But people just come in, you elbow in, you move their leg around, and then they come back every single week. And I was slowly just dying on the inside every day I worked there. So I had to quit. But over the years, I've sort of made it clear, and I've structured my business and my advertising and my marketing in a way that people can people are aware of what to expect when they come to see me. And the people that I see, so the people that I normally start working with, have spent up to, God, years, multiple decades of trying the other approach, and it hasn't worked. So they're at, I don't want to say a breaking point because that sounds quite traumatic, but they're at the point where they've realized that trying to get someone else to do something is not working, and they need to do something themselves, and they need to find a person or a program that they trust to sort of work alongside them while they figure this stuff out. So whilst a lot of people are aware that they need to put in work when they show up to me, their mindset, they know they need to work, but their mindset is probably the biggest thing that I end up working on, because these people have spent years not really in the right mindset, and we almost need to backtrack a really long way because a lot of these people have struggled for a long, long time, and we need to, challenge the beliefs that they have about what they're capable of, and what they think is possible for themselves, because they've been in such a negative space for such a long time. So whilst they're motivated enough to know that they need to do some work, mindset is a huge part of the work that we do, and nothing will work until we can get to the bottom of that. And I'm incredibly conscious that I am not a psychologist or a psychiatrist or anything like that. And the beauty of being trained as a primary care practitioner is that I am well aware and well linked in with qualified mental health experts. So I know when someone needs more help than what I'm delivering them. But we spend a lot of time sort of backtracking and finding where these beliefs have stemmed from with these people, and sort of just challenging those a little bit, just making them feel a little bit different. And sometimes all you need is a spark, and all you need is to give someone, a mentor of mine, he's a chiropractor from America, Craig Leemanson. He has this phrase, and you need to give people a positive experience with movement. And obviously that's very exercise based, and a lot of stuff I do is exercise based, but doing is believing. I can tell people that their back is strong and fine and they are capable all they want, but until I can get them to do something and they do it themselves, they're not going to believe it, because confidence demands evidence. So the more I can not trick them, that sounds a bit malicious, but slowly squeak these things into them and show them what their capacity is, the more they start to believe in themselves. And that's why I work with people for 6 to 12 months, because this takes time. And I'm pretty upfront that this is going to take time, but they know that, because 6 months is a drop in the ocean compared to the 20 years they've spent trying to get through this another way. But yeah, I think it's a great question. Their mindset is all over the place, but the people that come and see me are fully aware that it's on them, and they just don't know how to start, where to start, or what's safe.
Yeah.
So that's probably where we get going.
I guess it's because you've now like established that brand. So like the people who come to you, they probably, as you mentioned, actually, like they kind of know what they're getting type of thing, because you have that approach and stuff. So yeah, That's awesome. In terms of approaches, you mentioned mindset there as a key part of I guess life. Not just relating it to health, but just like life in general. There are three other parts that make up your approach to kind of overall health. You also mentioned that a lot of your solutions are exercise kind of based, so I'm guessing that comes into movement. So, can we walk through, yeah, like the four pillars of your approach to health, and maybe if you have like a top tip or a top action, actually, let's make it actionable for people, because as you said, doing is believing. So like, an action that they can take in each of these areas to help them improve in that area, if that makes sense. We'd love to walk through that.
Yeah, yeah. It's gonna be it's tough to narrow things down as well because people need different things at different times. But I suppose maybe what I'll do is I'll think of the things that I find myself most
Of course.
commonly addressing under each pillar. Um,
Yeah,
so
that
if
seems
we
good.
were to start with, yeah, if we were to start with the movement pillar, and especially people that come to me, whilst not all of them have pain, there's probably some element of they've either had injuries or pain or something in the past that has stopped them from exercising. So I'm aware not everyone has pain, and there are lots of reasons that people don't exercise, which are probably a little bit more under the mindset element. But in terms of when people come and see me, typically it's pain related. So maybe what I'll do is I'll give you the two tips that I tell everyone, and this makes rehab sound easy when you know these sort of when you know these things about training around pain. So my two rules, which I don't really have a great name for, but I'm going to call them the traffic light system and the 24-hour rule. So the traffic light system, this is talking about training or exercise or movement, whatever we're looking at in terms of just moving your body physically and managing pain at the time during exercise. So, in terms of the traffic lights, I would say if we were to rate your level of discomfort or level of pain, if we want to just say pain, from 0 to 10, 10 being worse, 0 being nothing, anywhere between 0 and 4 on the discomfort scale is green, because the reality is that you're probably being uncomfortable when you're technically pushing your body within its limits of the comfort zone makes complete sense to us. You're doing something that is challenging your body. So anywhere between a 0 to 4 on the discomfort scale, that's a green, because that's acceptable and expected. Now, when we move up anywhere between 5 and 7 out of 10, now we're in the orange zone. So this is the zone where we might consider going slow. We might consider swapping the exercise. We might consider modifying the exercise a little bit. So whether that's changing, we might reduce the weight, we might reduce the range of motion. There's lots of other little tweaks that you can sort of make to exercise. So that's why I obviously always suggest working with an exercise professional. But orange doesn't necessarily mean stop. It just means let's pay attention and let's be aware of what's happening during the exercise. Now, anything over a 7 out of 10, that is the element where we say, okay, well, that's a red light and we're going to stop for now. It doesn't mean you never return to those things, because the reality is you can't just stop doing a movement and never return to it, because you're never going to rebuild your capacity in that movement. So my simple advice to people is if it's over a 7 out of 10, just stop. There's no point for most people, unless you're in a competition or an event or something like that. There's no point continuing. Now that's the traffic light system. The follow-up to that, these two go together, which is why I'm linking them together. But the follow-up to that is the 24-hour rule. Because if you did an activity on the Monday, 24 hours later on the Tuesday, now we need to think back. And you're going to feel one of three ways. You're going to feel better, you're going to feel the same, you're going to feel worse. So the first two are great. If you feel better, amazing. You've done something healthy for your body, and your general pain levels have either returned to baseline or you actually feel better. Now, if you feel the same as you did before the exercise, again, that's a big win, because especially if you're rehabbing an injury, you've done something healthy and good for your body, you're challenging the tissues in a good way, and your pain levels have returned to baseline. Amazing. Now, the one thing we need to be considerate of is if 24 hours later, your baseline pain levels are now higher than they were before that workout, that exercise, that training, whatever you did the day before. And if that's the case, you wake up 24 hours later and your pain levels are higher, we won't panic. But what we will do is we'll look at what we've done over the past 24 to 48 hours and see if there's any logical explanation for it. Because again, the reality is that you're pushing your body beyond its current capacity. So sometimes it's going to be uncomfortable. And I think knowing that and just understanding that that's safe during a rehab journey is sometimes just what people need. So often people will panic, understandably, but just making people aware of that there are going to be moments that you are probably going to wake up and it's going to be sore and it's going to feel like you're going backwards, but it's just peaks and troughs. And all of a sudden, one day you're going to wake up and as long as you're getting stronger, one day you're going to wake up and you're going to just notice that you haven't had pain for 2-3 weeks and you didn't even think about it. Now, they're probably the two things that get in the way of people exercising. So that's probably my advice for the movement pillar, just having a bit of an understanding about training around pain. Ooh. What about let's go to the sleep pillar.
You can go to sleep.
We'll go sleep. So within my program, I obviously talk to people about sleep a lot, but I also have a sleep specialist that works within my program with me called Carla. So if someone has a bit more drastic sleep issues, obviously they work with Carla alongside myself, which is amazing. But from my personal perspective, I think unless you have a physical issue, a structural issue, sleep apnea, it's taking off at the moment, then most likely sleep issues are probably due to stress, psychological anxiety, stress. So in my opinion, I think one of the best things you can do is to create some sort of shutdown or wind down routine. And I know a lot of people are very big on things like, avoiding technology, avoiding light, making that the time to do gratitude and mindfulness, breath work, everything like that. And I love that because all of that helps positively influence the nervous system. What I will also add in is that, some people just wind down amazingly watching Netflix. I don't think we need to be as picky about all of the list of criteria in our sleep routine as it feels like we need to from a physiological perspective, because sometimes when you add all of these different rules in on people, it actually ends up just adding more psychological stress on them. These morning routines are getting so long and you're just sort of adding a bit more burden. So my advice to people is to just find an activity that you do find relaxing. Be honest with yourself. Don't say that you find watching Netflix in bed relaxing. If you don't, you end up just staying up well past your bedtime watching terrible TV. But if it is something that legitimately helps you switch off and wind down, then I say do that. Along with all of the other physiological benefits that fit normal, well, not normal, but the more likely wind down routines. What about what pillar would you like next? What would you like?
So actually, before we go to the next pillar, so just on sleep. So again, I'm not an expert necessarily on sleep, but I like the thing you said there of finding a relaxing activity. So I'm a huge football fan. So actually, when there's games kind of on in the evening, I actually find that relaxes me now. I'm also conscious of diving into kind of health in general and circadian rhythms, and then exploring. We just had an episode on like blue light, etc. So when I do tend to watch that at night, I do make sure that I like wear my blue light blocking glasses and kind of set up my environment so there isn't like a lot of light to disrupt my circadian rhythm like massively. But again, like we're not perfect, right? So I think like sometimes when we're kind of learning so much about health, I guess, as I have over the last 18 months, sometimes I feel like you need to be perfect when you don't, right? I feel like, as you're saying, it's finding something that you feel legitimately works for you, but also not bullshitting yourself as well. So like, if you are, as you said, binge watching Netflix, like actually, does that actually help you, relax you, or as you're saying, do you find yourself still at 2 a.m. in the morning still watching it? So I think there needs to be a level of honesty kind of with some of these things, but simultaneously finding something that you find relaxing and realizing that you don't need to be perfect or anything. So thank you for sharing that on sleep. Um, just quickly, do you have anything to add on that?
I'd probably just piggyback onto what you said. I think a lot of people sort of let what's the saying? Let's not let perfection get in the way of progress. I tell my clients all the time, I say, look, nobody does 80% better than me. Trust me. I am, because me doing 80% of all of the things that I know of what optimal is, in reality, puts me probably quite high in terms of the population, because I think I'm very realistic with people's health goals and health outcomes. And I think such a small percentage of the population should actually be aiming at optimal. And I think a lot of people are so interested in aiming at optimal that they're not putting into place average yet. The majority of the population is below average, right? When it comes to
Yeah,
almost every
basics as
marker of
well, isn't
health.
it?
Yeah. So I think, yeah, I think a lot of people are aiming at something that feels so unattainable
Mm.
that, they get overwhelmed and they quit. And then they end up yo-yoing and all this sorts of stuff. And then it's disheartening for people.
Yeah.
And that's when people can just be turned off entirely and get that hopelessness and just give up. And I hate hearing that. I have clients who have, told me so many stories of stuff like that. And that it borderline makes me so sad every time they tell me that, just because they've been trying so hard, but they're aiming
Mm.
so high. I'm going to get sad thinking about it.
No, definitely. Yeah, and just mentioned something else there. Like for me, I just try to focus on in terms of like being optimal and stuff. Like I resonate with that. And then I try to remind myself of like to do the basics. So like for me, um, using the example I gave beforehand, kind of on sleep and ensuring that if I do engage with tech or watch something in the evening, that I wear like limit light and blue light blocking glasses, etc. Because I feel like based on everything that I've learned, actually that is one of the basics in terms of light, and it kind of just I just try and think of in like uh simple terms, right? Like common sense, right? Like actually when we go to sleep, like the cycle of like day and night, and so if there's a lot of light at night, then actually that's going to affect my sleep and kind of all these sorts of things. So I just try and like focus really on the basics rather than as we're talking about here, trying to be so optimal and have like these long routines. So just kind of wanted to add that in there. I think the other two pillars to cover is if we go mindset, although we covered I guess a bit of that, but if we do mindset and then nutrition.
Yes, let's go with mindset. And there's a few. Maybe what I'll do is I'll talk to goal setting, because I obviously do a lot of that with people. And I think, like we sort of just mentioned, people are aiming over here and they set themselves up for failure. So maybe some simple a simple discussion about how I help people set goals might be useful, because I think you can take this away and sort of do this on your own. Um, one of the things that I like doing with people, and I've done for myself, is if your goals don't align with your values as a person, you are going to find it really hard to stick to them when things inevitably get tough. So a lot of people would probably listen to this and say, well, I don't really have any idea what my values are as a person. You might have a general awareness. If I asked you, what do you value as a person? You might throw some different words at me. But one of my previous mentors actually got me to do an activity that I believe was in Brené Brown's Dare to Lead book. You can just Google it. It's a sheet now. So if you just Googled Brené Brown's list of values, I think it comes up, and it's an activity. And basically what it is there's around 30, 40, maybe even 50 words that are written there. And the goal of the activity, or how I was guided through it, is to look at all of these words and basically you highlight the ones that resonate the most with you. So you set aside some time to do this. This is not a quick activity. This requires some sitting with yourself and being present, and a little bit of self-reflection and being honest with yourself. But you go through and you highlight the ones that resonate the most. And maybe the first time you do it, you highlight 15 out of the 40. And the objective of the task is to keep doing this until you are left with 2 or 3. And they are your values, and they are the things that you should always come back to when you're making decisions, or when you're setting goals, or just whenever you're doing anything in your life. So to give you a little bit of an example, when I did this task, I have 3, and I have them on a sticky pad, and they are on my computer. I look at them every single day, because when I'm tasked with a decision, I come back to these values, and if they align, I know that it's the right call. So my values are making a difference, personal growth, and authenticity. So I know if, as an example, when you asked me to do this podcast, when I'm deciding if I do it or not, what do I come back to? I come back to my values. Okay, well, will this podcast allow me to make a difference? Of course it will, because it helps me reach people that I would have never reached before. And hopefully people take something away from it, and it provides them value. So it helps me make a difference that way. Does it help me grow as a person? Of course it does. I've only done a couple of podcasts before. This helps me get better and better at clarifying my message, and probably going off on less tangents when I'm talking and getting distracted by different thought patterns that I have. And the fact that it's, you're quite a relaxed guy, you ask really good questions, so it makes me feel comfortable, and I get to just be my authentic self. So I know that we met beforehand, obviously, so I know that it's not, I'm not going to be on here pretending to be someone else. So it ticks all 3 boxes. So it was a yes from me. I felt completely comfortable about it. Now that I just said that, I did stray away from my thought a little bit, but now that you've got these values, when you come back to setting your goals, you need to tie your goals into these values. So I would get someone, what's a really basic goal? Let's just lose 15 kilos. Let's say I wanted to lose 15 kilos. How would I tie that in with my goal of making a difference? Okay, well, hypothetically, I don't have kids, but hypothetically, I would say I'm going to lose 15 kilos because it helps me set a great example for my kids. I will be able to play with them. I won't have to feel like I'm saying no and missing out, and the fact that they get to spend more time with me will help me grow as a person. It will help them grow as a person, and I will really be making a difference in my child's life. And now immediately, what used to be I'd like to use 15 kilos so I feel better, feel healthier, now it means so much more, because this stuff is going to get hard, and it takes time, and it takes persistence, and if it doesn't mean anything to you, you're going to give up. So I think tying goals to your values is one of the best things you can do. And the other thing, just a quick thing about setting goals that I think not enough people do. I say this on repeat to people before we have a goal setting session. You need to think of the tangible goals, what they are, but then you also need to sit and you need to think about the sacrifices that you're going to have to make to achieve the goal, or the trade-offs that you're going to have to make. Because not enough people, I think people set all these goals and they, for some reason, just think that nothing's going to get in the way and nothing's going to stop them because they're incredibly motivated at the time. But there is always going to be stuff that comes up, always things that get in your way. And you might sit and look at this list of things that you would need to sacrifice or trade off, and whether they're tied to your goals or not, you might think, I'm not willing to do that stuff. I'm not willing to sacrifice that. And I think acknowledging that at the start and then going back to your goals and changing them saves you 6 months of frustration and anxiety of, disappointment of not hitting something that you were setting yourself up to fail. So the more that you can acknowledge that stuff at the start, come up with a plan to get around all that stuff, the better off you'll be. So I think they're probably the two things that I find myself saying to people the most in terms of goal setting. There's so many different mindset things that I talk about and everything. There's even more goal setting stuff, but I think they're probably the two biggest nuggets that people could probably get wrong when they're getting started.
Excellent. Cool. And thank you for that. I wrote down about tying your goals to your values. I think that's vital, actually, and something that I'm now inspired to ensure I go back and do, ensure that I've done that. But in terms of nutrition, if we finish on this topic and some quick tips you have in the area of nutrition.
Yes, in terms of nutrition tips, obviously, again, I am so fortunate enough that within my program, whilst I've done my own learning in nutrition, sports nutritionist, everything like that, I now have the benefit of just sharing clients with the lovely Hannah, who works in my program as well. She's a sports dietitian, which is amazing. But the thing that I probably find myself telling people a lot in terms of the nutrition space is that try not to get tied to different methodologies or diets or fads or anything like that, because you see, and especially on social media, there's all these different camps. It's carnivore, it's vegan, it's low, it's keto, it's paleo, it's all these different things. And the reality is that you just need to find the one that works for you, that you can do sustainably. That's the quickest piece of advice I can say for that, because the reality is that most people are trying to lose weight. Now, the underlying reason that all of these different styles of diets work is that it helps you reduce your overall calorie intake. So it doesn't necessarily matter which kind you're using. Find the one that fits your lifestyle, and that's the one that you can actually stick with the longest, because especially from a losing weight perspective, it's a consistency and it's a sustainability game. So just find the one that works with your lifestyle and stick with it. Try not to get bored into the social media hype about what's better for what. They are very small nuances. And perhaps if we're dealing in those nuances, maybe you should be working with a dietitian anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of on the nutrition piece, thank you for sharing that. That's kind of one of the reasons inspired to restarting the podcast, and kind of through this prism of combining what ancient wisdom and modern sciences and kind of finding a truth consensus, because especially in the area of nutrition, very extremes and dogmatic kind of opinions on different protocols and stuff that I've noticed, and so I wanted to find some sort of truth consensus, etc. And I think that what I've kind of found is actually the key, or one of the key denominators, if it's keto or Mediterranean, whatever it is, most of them, if not all of them, eliminate ultra processed food, right? And then actually that is the biggest health benefit through the prism of nutrition that I think that, don't know if you would agree with this, Matt, that we can all, or most people within the health space can agree on that. Actually, sure, different individual protocols may have different nuanced benefits, as you were sharing, but the fundamental kind of consensus between all of them is that they eliminate ultra processed food, and that is the main issue in terms of like our health when we come to nutrition. So we'd love to get your kind of quick thoughts on that, if you would have anything to add, agree, disagree, and then would love to close out our awesome conversation today. Thank you so much for your time, by you sharing a little bit more about your work and where people can find you. Before we get to that, do you have any other thoughts on what I was kind of sharing there with nutrition?
Yeah, I think that's the big element, right? Like the reality is that eating, as naturally as we can is probably the best way to go. Our ability to process food it's been one of the biggest advancements in our lifetime. So we no longer, in especially sort of the countries that we live in, obviously we are fortunate enough that we no longer suffer from a lack of food. We have an abundance. So we've got an entirely different problem now. And I think, the universal marker of diet is obviously just trying to limit as much of the processed and the fake and all of these extra little nasty bits that are in all of these foods. I think if anyone just goes, I think what's the easiest tip that people always say? You stick to the outside of the supermarket, right? As soon as you dive into the inner aisles, you're just getting further and further away from actual food. And I think that's a pretty safe. I think that's a pretty safe bet. So if you just have meat, fruit, vegetables, I think some people would argue that grain or certain grains aren't for everyone. Look, I'm of the camp that people have different preferences, and again, I would refer back to what can you actually sustainably stick with, because I know people that just will never give up bread, and that's okay. We'll tweak things in a different way. Each to their own on that camp. As long as you're ticking the main markers you need, I would probably care the most about protein and fiber if we're just talking like from a quick macronutrient profile. But anyway, I digress. But I agree with your ultra processed food for sure.
That's cool. That's cool, man. There's so many other different nuances that we could kind of go down with the nutrition piece. Sorry for interrupting. So thank you for sharing that. I want to ensure we have time for you to share a little bit more about your program, your project, etc., and where people can find you.
Yeah, so I think probably the best place to find me is either on Instagram or LinkedIn. So both of those, just at Dr. Matt Corbin, MattCorbin. I'm sure you can just pop it in the show notes. But one of the things that I've recently started, which has been great, a lot of people have, unfortunate enough that a lot of people care what I have to say every single week, but I've just started a weekly newsletter where I'm talking all things lifestyle, medicine, and longevity. So pretty much anything that is under your control in terms of health. Every single week, I'm sort of throwing a different system, tool, or method out to my mailing list. And the idea is that these are mini projects that you take and you give it a trial for the next 7 days. And over that week, you decide whether it's something that you want to incorporate into your lifestyle or whether you're just going to throw it away. It didn't work, and then maybe wait for the next one. So if you follow me on either of those social media channels, you'll find the link to that newsletter, and I would love to get you on board, and hopefully you find the stuff that I put out on a weekly basis valuable.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. Learned so much today. So we've explored biomedicine, biomechanics, and then finished with your 4 pillars of health. I've made a ton of notes. So thank you for your time. It's been fascinating to dive into all of this with yourself, and I would encourage anyone and everyone who listens to who is listening to this episode to check out the description, check out the show notes, because all of your links, newsletter to social links, will be there. And all that I have to say, Matt, is thank you again for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
No, thank you. I loved it. I could chat about this stuff for hours. So maybe we'll do another one eventually, but I'm sure, I could gnaw your ear off for a long time. So I appreciate it.